I am the B tier. I said what I said. Okay, folks, you know what time it is. Chris Legion Games here. We're talking March. The most amazing things that went to crowdfunding, the most interesting highs, lows, and played of the month. You know what? Let's just go straight into it, because crowdfunding was a little all over the place. Crowdfunding was not as explosive as I expected it to be, as I already think April will eclipse that, but that's another video in and of itself. First up, my most interested one was Ivy Studios' Scales of Fate, a two-player in the line of the dueling type style games nowadays of, you know, Veiled Fate in the first place. And a very interesting take on it. I just wanted more, right? It's right up my alley, right? 15 to 20 minutes, a little bit of deduction, a little bit of chaos, a little bit of push your luck. I just wanted more actions on a round by round basis. I wanted more interactions. I wanted more out of the figuring out whodunit clue style, who your opponent is, like with Veiled Fate up here in the first place. I just wanted more of that. And it's good. It's good. But I just wanted more of that as my type of two-player head-to-head style. I love this type of game in a way. Like, I mean, just like with Mythic Mischief, it's a two-player abstract with a thematic incorporation overlaid. And that is, folks, my thing. I should be shouting it from the rooftops. And I just, you know, again, it sort of reminds me of Mindbug, hopefully, that it is going to grow on me with more plays, in that sense, because right now I have it sort of ranked as my third best Ivy Studios game for me, behind Mythic Mischief, which is 1 easily. Veiled Fate is like, you know, not 2, not 3. It's maybe like 3 to 4. It's really second. But what I'm saying is there's a gap between it, right? And then there's still another gap between this and Scales of Fate in that sense. Everything else is lower than that. So, I mean, there's still another gap between Scales of Fate and things like Tend or Fractured Sky for me personally, and how well they work with the people I play with and the things we super enjoy. So that's my dilemma with it as a whole. And that's why I think it's a very interesting thing to look at, because we're seeing tons and tons of these. The upcoming White Castle, we're seeing the upcoming as well, what is it, not the Critter Kitchen one, the Flamecraft one. I think Flamecraft one is going to be significantly different from what early previews comments have said. So those two are the most intriguing ones. But I guarantee right now, I guarantee this, when you're watching this, that we will have at least, we'll say half a dozen. I'm gonna go big or go home with this one. Half a dozen other notable dueling games between April and the end of the year. And you're saying, you know, that's not even one a month, Chris. I know, but that's also saying I think that this is actually a rage, and I think that you're gonna see more prominent ones get this attention. But I'll also make the argument that some of the best ones I've played, like my number 2 game and my number 1 game from last year, solely as two-player games, were designed not based off of necessarily systems that were done in that way. Okay, going halvesies on this one with Lord of the Rings, you know, Seven Wonders Duel. But Agent Avenue, awesome. Didn't have to be built off something else. So don't fall into the trap that the roll and writes did, that the roll and writes aren't as good because they're shoehorning in the previous game's mechanism and thematic incorporation, which usually never works as well in that regard. Second up, and truth be told, actually, my most excited, and the one I want the most, and the one I still want the most, Onward from Skytier, right? Two-player MOBA. I love Guards of Atlantis too. Speaking of that was like my number 2 game from like 2022. And this is a Battle for Eternia meets Guards of Atlantis mix, God tier-esque, with actually more lane importance, a rule book and tabletop simulator out before the campaign, and just freaking how Sky tier should be done. And I owe them a mea culpa, because I've got Sky tier Horde sitting right up here and the campaign's expansion as a review that I've had in the waiting in the wings, and I'm going to be putting out very shortly, either before or after this, a multi-game. This is something I haven't had a chance to do a dedicated video for, but it's an awesome game, and you should look at this from that brief aspect, like 5 games in like 10 or 15 minutes, just to give you a quick smattering rundown why I think it's awesome and what you should know or why you shouldn't get it. And so that is easily Easily my number 2. Now, Scales of Fate got $640,000, which is really, really freaking good. It's a little bit less than a lot of the other IV Studios games did. But Onward only has about $300,000, which again just reminds me that I'm one of the few select people that really loves Sky Tier Horde, that really loves, not Guards of Atlantis 2. A lot of people love Guards of Atlantis 2. A lot of people won't admit that they can't get Guards of Atlantis 2 played. I'm one of the few owners of Battles for Britannia. That is one of the best in this genre. And so this doesn't surprise me as a niche mechanic as a whole. But I give them a lot of kudos of just saying, here you go. I would love a slightly lower price point for the all-in, because I am tempted by those miniatures for the non-Sky Tier player. And that's going to cost you $200. That's a lot of money. At the same time, I give them freaking kudos for the all-in gameplay at $100 right now. That is good. That is good because, and you're going to go, yeah, it's not that good, Chris. It's good because that's 32 heroes. I'm not sure how I feel about 64 items. 64 items doesn't sound like enough for me. And 2 maps, plus or minus, with an expansion, an expansion, an expansion. So 3 expansions, no retail, and no pledge manager. And you know what? And one thing I'm going to be slightly critical of here is they're saying there's no pledge manager. And so they're going with a Garpho game situation. And that's okay. No late pledges, because they want it done and delivered before the end of the year, which I give a lot of freaking kudos to. Thank you, Sky Tier. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You should be thanking them. Say what you will about the funding, whether you think it's too little or it's not big enough, Chris, because people will say that. It's not, whatever. They're coming to the market with a game that's ready to freaking go. How many games, GameFound owners, Awakened Realms, Simon, these games, we just saw with the Awakened Realms Feast that they announced a campaign that's not starting until 2026. This game is going in the end of the first quarter of 2025, and you'll have it before that campaign even launches, for a scale and for miniatures as well. And that is to be applauded, because all of the companies nowadays are coming to crowdfunding with too early of a concept. When you can't give me a rule book during the campaign, I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. And so this is the way to do it. Plus or minus the pledge managers thing. So that has to be out there from just, as a small little caveat. Nobody's perfect, especially not this guy. So not throwing shade. Then third up, and I think this is exceeding all expectations, is Pond. Froggy Mayhem. Slightly lighter asymmetric root with frogs. Over on, of all things, right, backer kit. Brother Ming. $86,000. And again, you're going to look at that money funding total and don't let it deceive you. 1,200 people for gaining control of a frog pond. Again, out there, you can play it. The Discord is super active, and it's a root style thing that I'm going to have more accessible to. It reminds me, just like we were talking about with Onward being a more accessible Guards of Atlantis 2, more streamlined, more approachable for people with a little more need for lower overhead like myself. That's what this is. Now, truth be told, I'm not the biggest fan of this artwork. You know what? But what do I always say? What do I always say? Gameplay triumphs my care or my personal, this is not my preferred artwork style of things, right? Like, I've got this huge box of this chunkered sitting next to me. I'm not a huge fan of that art style. Guess what? Don't care. It's a good game. It's a great game, actually. It's a whole nother thing. Maybe I'll include that in the other video that I haven't done yet. But that's what my point is here, is that I think whatever your gut reaction, first glance aspect is with this, and again, I'm not going to say that you can't not discount that, that double negative. I think I screwed that up. You can discount games based off of your aesthetic. I'm not gonna tell you can't do that, right? I'm not gonna gatekeep. I'm not gonna tell you what to do in that sense. But what I am gonna say is that if you're able to get past that just for a minute, right? There are good games that you're gonna miss out on just because of that pure nonsensical reaction that we often have with stuff. Again, myself included. right? There are plenty of games, Castles of Burgundy, for example, that I had a hard time getting into because of the nature of that in the first place. And so you need to go past that. You need to go past skin deep in a lot of these situations. And again, I would just say over on BackerKit, when was the last time something not Spirit Island or Frosthaven caught your eye or raised significant amount of money, tabletop, actually specifically board game wise, on BackerKit? This might be one of the biggest ones in that sense. And so I just wonder too, if this would have been on GameFound or if this would have been on Kickstarter, if it would have gotten a lot more just from a walk-up traffic style situation. Again, that's just me musing and not really having a clue, but you know what? I like to think that it would rock your socks if you're one of those frequenters too. So maybe give that a look-see, but it's probably going to be done just like all of these by the time you're viewing this video anyway. So maybe late back at this one. Then we have to talk about my disappointment of the month. You know, we have to talk about this big box going to die, reprint, redo, redux, deluxeified, whatever situation with Champions of Midgard, the 10th anniversary edition, right? I'm all for a good anniversary, right? The heist of the century with WWE and Seth Rollins stealing the championship belt in a cash-in Money in the Bank situation, turning it into a three-way, and then winning at WrestleMania, right? Awesome. Right? Celebrating that. Celebrating, you know, whatever it may be anniversary wise. My wedding is going to be in our 13th year this year as well. You know, a little bit later this year, next month. But things like that and things like this are not the same in that regard. I know, total side tangent there with wrestling and anyway, but that's what you get on this channel. 10th anniversary, right? Okay. You already did a deluxeified big box sort of situation. You already did all this stuff. You're sort of redoing it. You're sort of reduxing it for the sake of reduxing it. And I just don't like this trend. Bezier's done it several times on crowdfunding. I can't say that it's wholly like not good for the hobby, and I just can't get into it, and I just can't condone it in the first place because I think it's wasteful. I think it doesn't need to be done. I'll make the argument even with Castles of Burgundy. I love the fact that that edition, it got more people into it, but at the same time, I also think it's an utterly waste of space and resources in the first place, as beautiful as it is to look at and as nice as some of those small deluxeifications are. Because the whatever anniversary of the retail version is in a smaller box and it's more accessible, and it works just as well. Because what did we just say earlier? Gameplay is the main number one A. Again, I know I'll have a couple of you in the comment section down below, and I have nothing wrong with people who like to deluxeify their things, you know, in that way. I have no problem with that. But I look at this and I go, we've already had a deluxeified version, right? How many times can Square remake Final Fantasy VII and make people buy it over and over again, right? The answer is we don't know. They're still going to probably put out another one before the time my kids are 30. But that's where I'm going with this, is how many times, how many different copies, how many different iterations of just slight variations, how many, you know, with Parks now putting out a third edition of Parks because they had some art issues that they're changing, and then they change just a slight gameplay. Is it really, again, this is the thing that gets people, and this is why the new editions are adopted. They make just enough tweaks to make you feel like your edition, even though there's absolutely usually nothing majorly or even, you know, potentially at all wrong with it, they make you feel like there's something wrong with it. They make you feel like if you don't have the newer edition with these, that you are not keeping up with the Joneses. Your edition, either they're not saying that, and they will even go specifically and say, if you have the previous edition, you're fine. Wink, wink, nod, nod, nudge, nudge. You're not. You need to get this one instead because this one is actually better. Even though we're not telling you it's better, we're subliminally sending you those marketing messages that it is better. That's the main problem I have with this, but no one ever will admit that. But that's why you see these reprints. That's why you see these deluxeifications. That's why you see these things in the first place in their hobby, because they want to milk the cow for as much as they can, whether that's the first edition in the trilogy, the second edition in the trilogy, the third edition in the trilogy of a similar overarching nemesis speak, or, you know, united speak, or whatever it is, right? I'm not picking on Simon or Awakened Realms, like everyone else is doing it. We're seeing it now with the dueling trends in the first place, right? You know, it's not that they need a version of Everdell or Azul or anything along those lines in a 2-player version, but they can milk the property because the property is a money-making revenue revenue generator. And so from a business aspect, I don't fault them. From a consumer aspect, I have to say, whoa, let's pump the brakes here for a second, and let's not make it that like that as a whole. And so I would like to see maybe a little bit less of that in that regard too. So balancing this side of the camera, that side of the camera is tough, but I understand it, at least from both. But we have to be cognizant of the fact that, again, from a consumer, I'm backing stuff Chris hat. They're not looking out for me, they're looking out for their bottom line. And their bottom line is good because I want more good games to be made, but I also don't want to feel like I'm constantly manipulated by marketing in order to fund your company in the first place. I feel like that's a little bit disingenuous if you're just preying on me rather than appreciating me as a customer, right? Those two things are very, very close to each other. They can look very, very similar. There's a thin line of gray sort of in the middle, and it gets obscured sometimes, and sometimes it's hard to tell, and sometimes you got to take a step back. And especially on crowdfunding, it happens. People don't think it happens on retail. It happens at retail just as much. We just don't call it out because it's not as fun and it's not going to get you as much clicks. I said what I said. I played a very big, wide variety of games in March. So narrowing down what was the best what was a little bit difficult here. A lot of crowdfunding stuff, actually, but overwhelmingly, one game dominated every single other thing. And we'll get to that though. So what we're going to do is we're going to go 7-1. Top 7 games that I played in reverse order, why they're at where they're at, how I feel about them even now, separately, even if you didn't watch any of the other stuff. And these are all ones that were new for me in this way. So number 7, Village Attacks. I got to play the Grim Dynasty expansion with a little prototype there. Again, I think that Keep the Heroes Out does everything I want for a reverse tower defense type game without needing all of the expansion content that I feel like Village Attacks kind of needs to get the variability in the enemies and the heroes that you're going up against in that regard, as well as the dynamics. There's plenty of scenarios, but I don't feel like it's quite as varied, especially base game to base game. And I feel like, especially at the miniature driven price point aspect, and feeling like I need an expansion like Grim Dynasty, like any of the others, to get a full feeling of it. I mean, it's a complete game, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, but to give me the full dynamics of variability that I desire in a one box package, it didn't deliver as much as I was hoping for in that regard. So I'm not saying I wouldn't play it again. I would be happy to play it again, but if you're going to give me an option, that's why I'd have it number 7 right now more than anything else. Then number 6, I just filmed a different video talking about this one slightly. Companion Quest from Ghostfire Gaming. Very nice family weight style dice placement, color placement based game with a cooperative nature of just trying to get across little areas based on dice and color numbers and combinations and little quests that you have to fulfill cooperatively. And if you can't, then the enemy moves, and it's very difficult, actually, surprisingly difficult for a family weight game. And it's probably actually higher difficulty than a family weight game. And so just that puzzle aspect of things was super pleasant. I was basically under expecting, and it overachieved. And that is similar to another one on this list, but I'm going to actually make number 5 Scales of Fate from Ivy Studios. Not because I don't think it's a good game. It might be one of the best games on this list, mechanically driven speaking. I wanted more actions on a round by round basis. Yeah, it's snappy. The rounds are quick. There can be some AP though if you're super trying to play into it. At the same time, there's not as much to give you that deductive element. You can have some of those round conditions that don't really ultimately help you, but you're not as hurt or penalized or even getting as much benefit if you fully can't get the other person's character's guess at the end of the game. So like, I just wanted to see more dynamic with those elements. And I think it's going to be a really good product. It's probably my third favorite still Ivy Studios game. So, you know, I'm going to be critical of the things I love, right? That's the whole point of this. It's not just to glaze over and say everything is awesome. That'd be probably better for my, you know, subscriber count and things like that. But I can't. So I want more of it. I want to see what the final product looks like. I want to see all of what it entails. And then it could easily rise up higher to catch maybe its predecessor and namesake, Veiled Fate in the first place, and Mythic Mischief, the other 2-player, again, because this is really just an abstract with a thematic incorporation tie-in, if you will. Fame and Fable is number 4. The other big surprise for me. I went into this card-driven concept of saying, I love the artwork. I'm really going to love this. And I contacted the designer. He was responsive. He was very patient for an idiot and a delayed video person like me who couldn't get it out right at the beginning of the campaign. It got 6-digit funding, which was shocking to me because, again, like, I always look at this stuff and I go, I really like that. But I always feel like on the hobby scene, especially on the YouTube side of things, I am quite often the outlier. I am quite often the idiot. I am the B tier, right? My opinions are, you know, that sort of thing oftentimes. And so I always feel like, oh, I'm going to like a game. Oh, geez, I'm the only one talking about liking this game. You know, but this one, you know, was attractive to other backers and it did really well. And so the combo driven card system of using your deck to fight these enemies and being able to draw from these various markets in dynamic ways with the action point system that they're using, it wasn't anything you haven't seen new before in that way, but it was one of those games like how I will describe Dwellings of Elderville or Ark Nova, right? You've seen those individual mechanisms done in other games, but here it's just a clever twist on something you know, and it's very pleasing, it's very homely, and it's very just, it was fun. It was fun. As they say, it sparked joy. And that is not always what happens. And if you know what I'm talking about, right? Not just I was happy, but like it sparked joy where I said, I really like this game. So kudos where kudos is due. Number 3, and truth be told, this one might sink a little bit lower as I get more plays in. I'm just not sure how samey I'm going to feel, but having the expansion does help a little bit too with Black Orchestra and the Resistance expansion. They were able to send it to me and I was able to cover it during the campaign. And like I said during my mashup video of multi-game review co-ops that were on crowdfunding, I can probably see when I redo my cooperative games, you know, of all time at the end of the year, because that's the only list I've actually done of my own personal, which reminds me I need to do my top 100 this year at some point. That's tough because I feel like I'm one of those people that can't just do it off a list. I want to grab the game each time, and that's so much work. So I'm probably just going to do a list. You know what? That's what all the popular people do. So I'll do it anyway, that like that. But that's why I feel like Black Orchestra could be on that top 25. I think it could. It was one of those games cooperatively, but just in general, that I always knew about, you know, in the last 3 years or so, but never really, you know, kind of had any interest in it. Like, I'm not a huge history buff. World War II, thematically speaking, does nothing for me. Going after Hitler, yeah, cool concept, don't care. Don't. And I said, okay, Chris, you are a self-proclaimed cooperative game lover. You need to try it out eventually. And then when the opportunity presented itself, I said, okay, sign me up. It's a hit. I really like the round deck avenue aspect of the events that are your trigger timer as you're going along. I like the slowly expanding where I can go in that element. The Valkyrie standalone was nice. It's probably ultimately too light and too samey. I still think the main criticism is this end game dice roll situation, which can be a complete and utter cluster F and just completely screw you. And with Valkyrie as the standalone, when it's a 25-minute game, and you know what? That happens, you can play it again. With Black Orchestra, that's probably my biggest criticism, is that, you know, if things go sideways at that point, it can be a little anticlimactic for me personally. I'm okay with that, though. And you know what? Because I lose a lot of these hard cooperative games in the first place in that regard. So losing is not something I'm unfamiliar with. I am very, very, very attuned to losing. I am a loser. So that's why it's number 3. Number two, you're going to be shocked by this. One of my potential games of the year candidates, Eternal Decks. Was a crowdfunding backer. Again, cooperative lover. This dynamic, card-driven combo system, numerically color-based. Again, just the words that just came out of my mouth are things you've heard dozens of times. Limited communication and, you know, just individual turn decision-making. It works. You can't quarterback. It gives you different dynamic restrictions, different scenarios. And I will say the biggest concern is that, well, can you play the same? Yes, you can play the same scenario. The decks are going to be slightly different. You can make up your own scenarios if you really want, but there are enough scenarios in the base game that you can then increase the difficulty of as you go along because you're too good, because you're actually an optimizer, analysis paralysis, min-maxer, buffer, if you will, unlike myself, who just plays crazy chaotically and shoots from the hip all the time. You'll still be awesome. And Portland Gaming Collective is supposed to be doing something with it at some point in the future. So if you didn't get a copy, can't get a copy, can't, steal somebody else's copy, you'll be able to eventually get one that way. And so that's why it's there. But, you're going, Chris, this is potentially one of your games of the year. And it was number 2 of, that's because I found the game. I bought this on a whim, right? I liked the artwork that somebody had posed. And I said, okay, I kind of half read the description. And I said, I think it'll work. And we took it on our trip with us. And Trios, the game of sets, of number sets that have numbers 1 through 12, 3 cards each of. And I got the Japanese version before we went on our trip. It's better artwork. Animals, right? Kids, right? It's a visual thing, just like with food. And all it is you just do the limited communication. You tell somebody, yourself or someone else, show me your highest or lowest card. And there's a little more nuance to it than that because you can, hit them up more than once in a row. But you have to reveal all 3 of a number in order to get that set. And you have to get 3 sets, potentially, to win. 2 sets that add or subtract up to 7. Or the magic in the middle 7 set to just automatically win no matter what. It plays best at 4, maybe even 5 with the dynamics going on, the craziness that happens. 2 is a little, predictable. 3 even can be a little bit more predictable, but it's not a perfect information game because also there's a mystery hidden face down card section in the middle of the table that you can flip up as an alternative to making someone else reveal one of their cards because you can only, like in Scout, play from the outside in. You cannot do the middle, which is why the 7 is so difficult to do. See what I did there? And we have played it more than any other game this year. This is requested from my kids more than Marvel Dice Throne, more than Chronicles of Evil, more than anything else that we have played in the last 6 months, easily a year. Maybe since Zombie Kids Evolution. It is that ecstatic. My wife loves it. Everyone we have introduced it to loves it. And so I'm probably going to pick up 1 or 2 more like this in the near future. I've been looking at the Magenta series, which is kind of getting middling reviews from CMYK. I'm looking at the hype hot rage of Flip 7, which is, everywhere. It's getting a 2nd edition through Walmart exclusively for like $8. I'm probably just going to pick that up for $8. And so that is, over 25 plays at this point, just this past month. Just freaking insane. It might even reach triple digits by the end of the year, which would be insane for us. The only thing that comes close to that is like Uno right now. My 4-year-old is obsessed with Uno. We have a 4-card version of sea creatures, and then we have a 2-card Uno version of animals with letters, right? So there's 26 sets of letters, and there's a capital and a lowercase, and it just works too, and he's obsessed with that, and we played that more than anything else in my collection easily. So that's what I got. That was the best of the month. Let me know what you think. Comments, questions, concerns, or anything else down below. Hit me up. I want to know. What was your best? Please tell me. I really am interested because I want to find other hidden gems like the internal decks, like Trios, and like Black Orchestra, or any of these others that were in the top, because that's what this is cool about. I want to hear from you. You want to hear from me. Hit me up. Let me know. Subscribe if you made it this far. Peace out. Have a great freaking fantastic day.